Even though I want to say that this is creator forward, it's a bit too safe to actually be like that. Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb Initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week I'll be talking about, similar to the last episode, even though this is really late considering everything, but sorry about that. But anyways, this week we'll be talking about another original anime, Metallic Rogue. But before I start, some disclaimers, spoiler alerts. We'll be talking about most of the things that happen in this anime. It is, let's say, it has some plot twists, but in my humble opinion, most of them are really telegraphed. So I wouldn't say that this is really like an important thing to consider, but at the same time, be aware that I will be talking about the whole of the anime in itself. I will not do the whole like plot synopsis because for the most part, I just remember the story beats because the story itself is somewhat uneventful. But at the same time, I will have to discuss the plot twists kind of that they do at the end. Even though if you catch up with the story, it becomes really obvious what the conclusion is. But even then, again, spoiler alert. With that being said, let's get to the stats. So Metallic Rogue is an original anime with 13 episodes, no extras, no OVAs, whatever. Aired between January 2024 to April 2024. Done by Studio Bones. Studio Bones, also known as most prominently from you got it. They did both versions of Fullmetal Alchemist. So Fullmetal Alchemist, let's say the original anime, and then Brotherhood, Mob Psycho, Bungo Stray Dogs, Noragami, and some other stuffs, but and Boku no Hero obviously, but most prominently I think FMA and Boku no Hero. With that being said, let's start with the story. So, Metallic Rogue, it is, I would say that it does borrow from a lot of places. It does begin really, and this is a thing with the plot of this, and one of the shortcomings of this anime overall is that it wants to be more than it can actually like show. It feels like they bit a bit more of what they could chew somewhat, but I will not be here and start like ranting about creator intent because for the most part everything that I say here is not something that I can confirm even though I wanted to, and as such, I will only have to stick to the facts of the whole thing. So, Metallic Rogue is a story about a future on, let's say, our future, somewhat. So, some years from now, more or less, Earth had its first contact with aliens, and through cooperation with the aliens, which we call visitors, they gave us technology, and we basically gave them the promise of building a place in, I think, Venus for them to live, because at that point they lost their home planet for a second race of aliens called what we would later on call the usurpers, and so on and so forth. The thing about this is that Mion already saying this is much more explanation than the actual anime gives us throughout the like, I don't know, the first 6 episodes. So the thing about this is that we start the story with our main character, Rouge, Red Star. Rouge in this case, I don't know French, but I'm pretty sure that it means red. She, at first, at the very least in the first episode, she seems like a normal human and stuff. And we get these really like vague story bits at the beginning that Rouge has. She is the helper of a famous singer, and we have this whole presentation about this robotic race that was created by humans called the Neons, and how Neons, they have a dependency on a chemical called nectar, and it is somewhat of a life dependency on this. So if they don't take it from time to time, I think once a day or something like that, they will eventually perish. And the whole thing about and the enemy is not really, let's say, subtle about this, but they already get from the get-go the idea that the Neons are the exploited race when compared to the humans and so on and so forth. Add to that the fact that Neons, being robots, they are tied by the Asimov code. The Asimov code I will not enter here, but basically it is, and I don't know if in our real world it is actually implemented. I really don't know, but it is this literary ideal that came from a book. I will not remember the name of the book, but Asimov was the name of the author. I think was The Robots Count of Electric Sheep, something like that. Basically it is the code that determines the guiding principles of robotics. The main one of this is that robots cannot harm the humans that created them, and as such the whole thing starts with the idea that Neons are de facto slaves to humans, all things considered, even though throughout the whole of the series we will see that some Neons are, let's say, better positioned in terms of human society, and some have more caring owners and so on and so forth. And you get the vibe. Aside of that, we get the idea that Rouge has a partner somewhat. At first they are represented by a bird. I think it's a blue swallow, Aoitori something bluebird, and starts playing Naruto opening or Idolmaster, but you get that. And we get from the get-go that, and this is like secretive kind of deals, the fact that both Rouge is Neon and the singer that she's assistant to, I think her name at the beginning is Sarah, she's also a Neon, but nobody actually knows about this, and so on and so forth. And the whole thing about this is that by the end of the first episode we get our first conflict where a red, I would say mecha power armor, it is not giant, so I wouldn't call it a mecha really, comes to fight and try to assassinate Sarah, though they start fighting, and then we get to know the idea behind this whole thing that not everyone, but some of the Neons that appear more human, because the normal Neons have the let's say circuit marks on their skin, and some of the special Neons such as Rouge and Sarah, they don't actually have them apparent, so they seem human, and they can transform into like battle armor kind of deals. And so they start fighting. Eventually we get this really vague idea that Rouge is actually the bad guy, because from this first encounter we only get that Viola, being her real name, just wanted to live a normal human life, and Rouge, for whatever reason, came all the way from Earth to Mars to the moon. I don't actually remember which planet they are at the beginning, to just assassinate her and take what they call the E, which is like this core of the Neon and so on and so forth. And added to that, I may have like jumbled up the order of the facts, but even then, we get to meet the actual face of Rouge's partner, being Naomi Ortoman, who will be the inseparable, I will not say sidekick, because she calls a lot of shots throughout the whole anime, but you get the idea. So this is the first episode. It does build up a good base, I would say, though for me, at the very least, it does lack a lot in terms of first being really vague with everything on its explanations. It does not want to like show all its cards at once, which is okay when talking about let's say something of more predetermined, or let's say a more obvious kind of setting. But in this case specifically, I would say that it does not help here, because even though we can get the vibes of the whole setting, there are enough different things that we would need explanations for, so it would be better, at the least in my opinion, that they would like give different lore explanations for things, more drip fed, rather than keeping up these mysterious fronts to then later try to explain everything. And this comes to head throughout the whole anime, I think, maybe until like the 6th episode, when we have this huge like lore dump in between of the action scenes, which I think is kind of jarring. So there's that. But anyways, to give the whole plot really like give somewhat of a plot idea rather than a whole synopsis. The whole thing runs down like this. So Rouge is what they call a proto-neon. So she is a special kind of neon that doesn't seem like one, and she has been created by the one person that actually created the neon kind of framework, a doctor called Eva. I will not remember her surname, sorry, but she's called Eva. So there's that. There are a lot of like little tidbits of like biblical references to other stuff, but anyways, so Eva is the one that created all the neons, and most of the neons are mass produced in Venus to work more labor intensive jobs and terraform Venus itself. Why they are terraform Venus? To get the visitors, which are the first alien race that gave the neon framework originally to the humans, a new planet to live. Then at some point Eva vanishes, leaving behind some weird stuff. And aside from that, Rouge being Proto-Neon being created by Eva, she is part of this one organization that I know that they use a different name in the dub. Like the subtitle says one thing and the VAs say other thing, and I really don't actually know the real actual name of the organization, but basically it is like a special organization that takes care specifically of neons and other stuff throughout the whole galaxy. So at this point humans have already mastered interplanetary travel, not really intergalactic, but anyways we can move throughout our whole solar system. With that said, Rouge is part of this organization. Naomi is part of this organization and basically acts as Rouge's handler, more or less, because at this first instance of the anime, and this is something that will come up just really late because I'll get to that, but basically Rouge is a neon and Naomi is the human handler, something that is a model of cooperation that we will see throughout the whole anime for a lot of things. But anyways, what's the real actual mission here? So they are tasked off the books by what Rouge is called her big brother, Jean Jundergaard, I think, who is the vice director of the organization, to basically hunt down the 9 proto-neons, or also called the 9 immortals, which are the special neons that look like humans, as an act of revenge, because for as far as he knows, they killed his father and Rouge's father by extension, because they consider each other brother and sister. So there's that. Then the whole like premise of the beginning is that they are searching for all the 9 immortals, and at this point when Rouge's finally kills Viola, they have I think 4 of the IDs, I think. Add to that, then they go to Mars to find another one. They go there, find a new one, and throughout this, we get the vibe that, and this is a thing about character development and stuff, but at the very beginning, Rouge is really childish with everything that she does and the way that she interacts with Naomi specifically. And not saying that Naomi is the most mature person in the room of all times, but she is a bit more pragmatic, and this is something that comes up later. Naomi is really pragmatic compared to Rouge, and Rouge is really childish, not really playful, but she pouts a lot, she throws tantrums. The only thing that she actually likes is chocolate, which is like the character quirk, while Naomi eats anything and everything that she comes around. And then we have this whole dynamic between the two of them, and this growing cooperation throughout the whole series. As they go and find different of the 9 immortals, we have different cases. Rouge ends up developing a bit more of a, let's say, a humanity, more or less, and as such the story goes from there. Eventually we get to meet the actual bad guy, let's say, of this whole thing, which is obviously not obviously, but and here's the thing, I wish I could watch along with everyone that's going to listen to this, but because so much of this is so telegraphed. It becomes, at the release in my head, it becomes somewhat of a joke how much they actually like want to play it like this is really important, and how this whole thing is a self-serious and stuff. But at the same time, it feels so obvious. Some things are so tropey, and the trope, it seems so close, and it ends up being real that you just like shatter the suspicion of the disbelief. Like, I know what the hell is going to happen, you don't have to tell me. And at the same time, it does stay kind of serious throughout the whole thing, which then makes the whole thing more silly. I don't know if I'm making sense, but the whole thing about this anime is that I don't think that it is strictly like badly written. It's not like the writers were not there or something like that, but I feel like this was written so safe and so without any sense of like trying to have some kind of different ongoing for the story. It feels so safe and really not like, it lacks personality. That's the thing. The whole thing about this anime, and I'm already jumping the gun here, but anyways, the whole thing about this anime is that both the character art, the whole of the designs and the ideas of these robots that look like these androids that look like humans that can transform to these badass forms and fight and so on and so forth, and the whole animation stuff, this is nice, this is really great. But then you come to these really tropey, really safe, really lacking sauce kind of story, and it just feels like I'm watching Pacific Rim. Like, what the fuck, bro? Like, Pacific Rim had a way worse story than this in like proportions and comparison, but it does feel like the story is the weak link here, whereas everything else is so great. The story is a weak, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So basically, at the beginning, they start with this whole search and destroy all of the Immortal Nine. Then eventually the anime catches up with itself, notices that they only have 13 episodes to actually do this, and not like I would say the wishful 25, and then they kind of have to pivot into finding every one of the Immortal Nine really quickly. The Immortal Nine, each of them having somewhat of a influence throughout the story. Add to that the whole trope about you have effectively two criminals, being Rouge and Naomi, running against a detective with his assistants, and basically detective is always like one step behind of them, which eventually they catch up with each other, become allies, and so on and so forth. But that's one trope that it feels a bit too close to home for me. It is not bad, but it feels a bit too on the nose. Then we later on discover that there is an actual bad guy who is working for the usurpers, who are the second alien race that appeared on Earth, that actually had a whole war about it, and that's why there are so many Neons, because at some point humanity created the Neons to fight the usurpers, because we then find out really late in the game that the reason why the visitors don't actually have a home planet anymore is because the usurpers destroyed it. And then the whole thing about they can't come into Earth, they give the Neon technology to the humans so they can create Neons and defend against the usurpers, and eventually they do for the first time, but then the usurpers come back, and this is why there's this whole thing happening. So we then find out that I'm saying this like the Immortal Nine are like the one-dimensional bad guys. Actually, they do try to humanize the villains a lot more than you would expect. So at one point they do like create their own figurehead for the villains, being the somewhat of a mastermind, somewhat of the whole thing about the Immortal Nine. So they are led by I will not remember the full name of any of them, but they're led by Sylvia, who wants to use what is fragmented inside each of their IDs, include Rouge's, that is called Code Eve, to then overwrite the Asimov code that is inside of each of the Neons, subsequently creating a separate race, because at the point that the Asimov code is nullified the Neons wouldn't need to obey humans altogether, and so they will like create their own planet and separate and stuff. But then there's this whole like build up of the conflict being like order versus freedom, because at the point that if you liberate everyone at the same time, then you will like shatter society and stuff. And then I will not like enter in the parallels with the real world here, because I don't feel like I am in a place to talk about something like this. But at the same time, they do try to drive the point home, and for one episode I think that it is kind of okay, but at the same time they do this, but they then eventually, and this is like they're nearly there, like completing their plans and stuff, but then they find out that actually there is that bigger, better guy that is actually working for the usurpers, that actually is Jean's and Rouge's father, who actually is the father of all the Immortal Nine, who actually faked his own death, and not really faked his own death, but he downloaded his own personality into a Neon body to then create this whole situation because he wanted to lead the Neons and help with the usurper for some reason, which is never actually explained. But then oh my god, then the whole thing kind of breaks down from there. At this point we are truly in the like very end of the anime. Rouge is, for one reason or another, she ends up losing her ID but not actually dying. Then we find out a bit before this that actually Naomi is a Neon, but she's like one of the original Neons created by the visitors, and then the visitors are actually living on Earth at this point. And basically Naomi is an inside like a double agent for the visitors to guarantee that the usurpers wouldn't like fuck up anything, and the Code Eve, that's something that would have been something super secret, but somehow they discovered about it, wouldn't kind of leak and like create this whole chaos stuff with the Neons being liberated. And at the same time she has this whole thing about being super logical, so there's the explanation of why she's so pragmatic every time, and the whole thing kind of goes from there. So they like snowball the whole thing in the last episode. But anyways, and with she being a Neon, she can like borrow her ID to Rouge without actually dying somewhat, and so Rouge can like transform into kind of like Sylvia at that point, and Sylvia in her father or the puppet master, whatever you want to call him. But at the same time she will lose because Naomi's ID is non-combat, so she's weaker than him. But then they create this bullshit kind of energy concentration kind of stuff, and somehow Naomi's body dies, but then she is more or less transferred into Rouge, so then they kind of level up, which then, and I will just leave this here, I think this is the most, like, I will not say this is Yuri out loud, but this is the closest thing that I can show in this anime that does not have explicit Yuri to be them like becoming one. So basically there's the ship like done and dusted somewhat. It feels really weird. And then they level up, they win the fight, they kill Sylvia ends up dead because of the puppet master. They kill the puppet master, they kill the second body that the puppet master appeared with, that is a different Neon that wasn't even in the consideration at the beginning of the anime, but apparently she was like the V1 of Rouge, so she's kind of Rouge's little sister. The whole thing kind of goes from there, and basically they kill everyone, they grab Rouge's original ID, and she ends up like choosing chaos at the end, even though 2 episodes ago she was all about order and stopping Sylvia from actually liberating everyone. She just chooses to liberate everyone because of whatever. And then when they do, actually JK, there is a trap that if they do liberate Code Eve to every one of the Neons will be like possessed released by the usurpers to help them fight on Earth. But then JK, the writers actually found out that this was the last episode and they cannot really expand more on this idea, so they have to like grab Deus Ex Machina from the like the break the glass if nothing is actually working in the writing department. And they say that Gina actually foresaw the fact that there would be a trap and made an antivirus for this one virus so that the trap would spring but actually get cured at the same time, so the Neos wouldn't be like full-on bad guys but would actually have all the benefits of the code they've been released, and which then like the anime ends so badly, like, oh my god. So this whole thing happens, and the last shot of the anime is like the usurpers coming to Earth to fight, and then there's Rouge with Naomi inside of her, fighting the bad lady that appears a bit before. That's the end of the anime. No thank you. No, I would say no indication of a second season, because at this point, bro, like I don't like to actually take this as a metric, but I mean the score on my anime list is 6.2. Like, I don't know if the Japanese public like this more than the Western public, but what I would say is that they committed so many things to the first season that I would be hardly pressed to say that they can do something of a second season, because at this point, especially, and this is the thing that really grabs me, like, oh my god, this is terrible, especially because they killed off Naomi in the way that they did, unless they want to like really do the couple, like, oh, you have a new body, bro, there's no second season for this thing. Like, this is so anticlimactic. We have this whole build up about revenge, about freedom, about racism, about class warfare, about freedom of choice, and what is a person, what is humanity, if effective AI can be human. There's all these kind of concepts thrown around, and it is the end of the anime, like nothing happens, like, holy shit, bro, who signed on this and said like, yeah, it is well done. Like, me person, and this is me because I am a jaded motherfucker. Like, bro, what the fuck? Like really? What was the idea here? Like, really? What was the whole deal here? Like, we did everything that we have done. Like, we went through a whole lot of planets. We met a whole lot of different characters. Some of the characters ended up dying on like a okay scene. Some of them died for somewhat dumb reasons, and some of them just like cheated death because the plot needed it. But at the end of the day, nothing really was resolved. Like, yeah, they kind of stopped one part of the usurper invasion, but clearly by the end of the anime, the usurpers still invaded Earth again. Like, nothing, like, it didn't go to actual plan. And then, oh my god, man, there's so many like little side stories for this anime that would have been better if they could actually have time to actually do them well. Not to mention also this anime, it has that issue at the Yu-Gi-Oh meme again, that you can point out who is probably the bad guy, or better, who is someone that will actually be plot relevant. Like, the designs for each of the Immortal 9 that appeared at release, they are all really interesting, with the exception of Griffon, but that's my opinion. And the whole thing kind of runs in circles and not really like taking a stance about about the whole thing, which to me really like annoys me, because at the end of the day, the writing is too safe. Like, they use too many Deus Ex Machinas to solve issues. The thing about Naomi being transferred into Rouge, I think, was the one thing that I was like, this makes, from everything that the anime shown, that had made no sense at that point. This was the thing that I was like, what the what? Like, how? Why? Like, bro, are you actually saying that to me? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, if Naomi just straight up went there and died, I would have been okay. It was a sacrifice worth doing. But them going together, like, come on. Like, if you want to show Yuri, just show them Yuri. Don't be like that, you know. But this is about the whole of the plot that I want to talk about. So, just to give context for those who didn't actually get this, but the whole plot twist is that Rouge's father at the end of the anime is revealed to actually being alive and so on and so forth. But there's that. Talking about my opinion. So, outside of what I already said, first off, this anime, it is good. I really do think that this anime is well done, though I would say that it does lack a lot in the story department. It does like want to be something great, but I feel like it trips on itself, because, and this is like talking about references here, I feel like it does borrow a lot from a whole lot of places, especially, and this is from watching very few Gundam anime, but Gundam specifically, but it does feel somewhat like what they do in Gundam, that they take somewhat of a social concept and kind of build up from there, that being the idea, I don't know, if you take Suisei no Majo, you could say that it is the sins of the father, the idea of proving that oneself is different from their past, or the past that built them, and you go from there. When talking about like Iron Blood Orphans, you can go for the social aspect, you can go for the brotherhood that they build up, the whole thing about fraternal love, the camaraderie, blood ties, and so on and so forth, being trusting each other, sacrificing for each other, and so on and so forth, whatever. And these anime specific, Metallic Rogue, I think, Metallic Rouge, they do kind of try to do that a whole lot of times, and I think that if you really take this slow, it does show up more, like it does like glow up a bit, but they never actually go and develop any of it, which then leads me to say that it feels like an effort not well used. It is kind of like they don't have enough time to actually develop any of these concepts. It becomes this like show of somewhat virtual cycling because they have to, and not actually building up from there. And the one thing that I know that the story kind of builds up from this, but the whole build up of like the structural racism that Neon suffer to build up for revolution, it does make sense, but you never actually get to the point which you see like the revolutionaries going together with the oppressed. So then it becomes kind of that vain revolution, like, yeah, you're gonna do that, but they are still going to be structurally discriminated, you know? So it kind of feels weird. And then there's this point. There's another point that character writing. Character writing is not the problem. The problem is the way the plot actually builds that. Because there is this one point by the middle of the anime that for one reason or another, and then they explain this later, but Naomi ends up like turning the tables on Rouge and kind of revealing that she's actually with I'll use this term lightly, but she actually reveals that she's with the police, and then locks up Rouge because of that, because they are actually de facto criminals, and as such there is this whole like betrayal mania of sorts. And then later on, when they reveal that Naomi is actually someone important to also the visitors, it becomes like she's goddammit, like she's the fucking Dragonborn. Like, and this goes from who actually played Skyrim. If you haven't played Skyrim in the big 2026, I don't know, bro, like sick hell. But the thing is, when you play Skyrim, you are the Dragonborn, the Whisperer, I don't actually remember the name of the chosen one of the companions. You are Nightingale. I don't actually remember the name of the chosen of the Thieves Guild. The Whispering one is the chosen of the Assassins Guild. And then there's this whole thing. You defeat Mirak. You become the very like one in a billion of having all these different special traits within you, somehow, and nobody actually like explains how. And it becomes like the same thing with Naomi, because she's part of the part of one important organization that is actually a double agent for the police, that's actually the double agent for the visitors, that actually is a Neon. At that point, and this is because it's a plot device, but at that point we never actually see her consuming nectar for any reason. And like, what the fuck? They just like drop it like, oh no, yeah, I'm not human. everybody like, what the fuck? Like, bro, come on. I really felt like it was strange because at some point by the end of the day, I really would have thought that she being Ania, she would like form and be like the pair with Rouge and stuff. But they don't actually do that. They do the whole joining up with her in her head because whatever. And I was like, holy shit, bro, this is terrible. And then this adds up to my theory, and again, I'll not enter creator intent here because creator intent is something that it is not confirmable, but it does feel somewhat, and this is based on, I would say, character designs more than anything, but it does feel like they wanted this to be somewhat of a Licorice Recoil kind of deal, which in a way I wouldn't like be too mad about, but it does lack the cutesy aspect of Licorice Recoil. I think that this is way too edgy for its own good to actually be like that, which then leads me to, at the release, my own headcanon, because it does borrow a lot in terms of theming of the cyberpunk stuff and the whole kind of living normal lives with a bit more technology and stuff. And this is for the OGs here who actually listened to this show from the very beginning, and the unks that are cruising through to the 30 years old mark. But I don't know, it reminded me a lot in terms of vibes and styling and stuff. Not really styling, but you get what I'm saying. It remind me a lot of Burst Angel, Bakuretsu Tenchi. It does have the whole thing about girls with guns and stuff, and it does add up a lot with like the way that they tell the stories. I know we have less like recurring characters in terms of allies. We don't have Kid Genius in Amy, we don't have Kohei as the perspective character, and neither of the girls are as violent as Joe, but the thing is, right, it does remind me a lot of it in terms of the whole like personality, in terms of design, the fighting style, the whole thing kind of reminds me of that, though it is really more soft than Bakuretsu Tenchi was. I would say this is an effect of the times, and somewhat it's more appealing to be a bit more cute than edgy nowadays, whereas I think that back in 2005 it was a bit better to be edgy. But even then, it did remind me a lot of it in terms of not only like design wise, but the whole idea of having, and these couples way too well for me to not say it, but the idea of having this original anime with this pair of girls that go on different adventures. One of the girls is the muscle, one of the girls is somewhat of more the brains, but that part may not really go there, but because Maggie was not the brains of the operation when talking about Bakuretsu Tenchi, but anyways, having this visual identity of themselves and having a really weird opening and ending and having this whole thing, I feel like it is really close to Bakuretsu Tenchi. But well, anyways, with that being said, again, this anime is not like unwatchable, but I would say that with 13 episodes I have seen better. And me being extra picky when talking about original anime because I feel like it is a dying breed. I wish that it had a bit more care when making it, and a bit more personality. I'm really serious about this part. The story has zero salt. I feel like it is really underdeveloped, underexplored. It feels really bad, man. But again, the anime overall is pretty great. Animation is pretty great. The art is pretty great. Visual identity of the characters, I think, is really, really strong. In terms of name symbology, we can debate that on another occasion. But overall, it's really nice, though with some glaring flaws. And now, with that being said, thank you guys for listening, thank you guys for watching. Please like, please share, please follow, depending on the platform you're in. And I hope to stick around for next time. Bye.